Right. Good morning, staff. Let's crack on straight away, shall we? Today, keto kills. Cardiologist reveals ketogenic diet risks and science on how it causes heart attacks and strokes. Me and this bloke are going to get on famously, aren't we? Stick around for that. What do you think? Are you ready, Ted?
Good evening and welcome.
Don't miss this one.
Ketogenic diet can absolutely kill you. This is Stephen Loam, lifestyle medicine cardiologist, and in this video, I'm going to tell you that the ketogenic diet can absolutely kill you.
Okay, so you've just told us in the space of about 5 seconds on 2 separate occasions that this diet is going to kill us. Now provide the science that it's so. And tell us how this has been hidden from the public hitherto so that it's not already well and truly known that there's a significant rate of death associated with the ketogenic diet, sufficient to scare enough people to go, we don't want to do that. Maybe it's just something you made up, Stephen.
We're going to go through what
As a cardiovascular pathophysiologist, first and foremost, I can reliably reassure reviewers at this point that there will be no science presented here by Stephen whatsoever that supports his claim, his theological claims, basically, regarding any aspect of nutritional health outcomes of any kind. He's going to give us appeal to authority, fallacy, nonsense, and squeak on about something for a bit. So let's hear that.
the ketogenic diet is, the science behind the risks that the ketogenic diet has, and then what you should be doing really to get yourself healthy, lose weight, and live a long, healthy life.
In your opinion, which I suspect isn't worth very little, Stephen, frankly.
Yes, the ketogenic diet kills, but
3 times in less than 2 minutes. Awesome. Got any evidence yet? Or you just want to keep repeating the claim without providing any evidence at all?
before we get into those details, make sure you subscribe to my channel and turn on those notifications so you don't miss any of my future videos. Do that right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't bother doing that.
All right, let's go. The ketogenic diet can increase the risk of heart attack.
False. There is no evidence to support that claim extant anywhere in the literature.
Increase the risk of stroke.
Same answer. False. No, there is no evidence for that whatsoever.
And increase the risk of many different types of
False again. No.
cancers.
Absolutely not, Stephen. Sorry. No. No scientific evidence supports that anywhere in the literature. Those are just theologically based opinion statements. Just rubbish. What do you think, Ted?
Bollocks!
Thank you.
So what is a ketogenic diet? Well, it's a diet that's really low in carbohydrates, about 5 to 10% of calories, that is higher in protein, about 20 to 25% of calories from protein, and very high in fat, about 70 to 80% of calories from fat. Things like fruit are completely avoided. Same with potatoes, beer, rice, bread, sugar, all the high...
Are you making it like beer is a good thing and we shouldn't avoid it?
carbohydrate foods are completely excluded. This puts you into a state of ketosis where your fuel, where your body is changed away from glucose over to ketone.
Not strictly true. In fact, that's a gross under provision of information. It's just a complete misrepresentation of what occurs in ketosis.
Same thing that happens when somebody is starving.
Completely irrelevant. Because you're not starving on a ketogenic diet. You're still intaking quite a bit of energy, quite a bit of food. Not starving.
Now let's see what some of the major authorities have to say about the ketogenic diet. Let's start.
Who cares what any number of authorities have to say on any topic regarding our health? We make our decisions about health based on empirical data, scientific evidence, not some bought and paid for opinion.
Start with the U.S. News and World Report rankings. Drum roll, please. 24th out of 24.
Who cares? So what?
Dead last in regards to overall diets for heart health.
No, because there are no evidences that can inform us on the dietary effects on health long-term in human beings in existence. No such studies could possibly have informed on such a conclusion. So this is just someone's opinion.
And of course, heart disease is the most important thing.
Agreed to a lot of people.
Heart disease has been the number one cause of death in the United States every single year since 1919.
Absolutely true, but so what?
They say, who should not try the ketogenic diet? How about pregnant women, children without epilepsy, people with certain types of cancer, people with heart disease, high-performing athletes shouldn't try this diet.
Who cares? It's somebody's opinion.
Health risks are very significant. Brain
No, they're not.
fog, moon swings,
Brain fog is not a serious health concern.
constipation.
Constipation is not particular or peculiar to ketogenic diets, nor is it causal.
High cholesterol,
That is not a health concern of any kind.
which could cause heart attacks, stroke.
No. False statement of cause and effect there, unsupported by literature in any way, shape, or form, by scientific endeavor. That's an opinion.
Stroke and death,
Well, we all die sooner or later.
kidney problems, liver problems, nutrient deficiencies,
None of those things have been causally linked with ketogenic diets in any way, shape, or form. Just complete rubbish.
Mayo Clinic's verdict, very
Who cares what the Mayo Clinic thinks or what they are bought and paid off to tell people they think? What possible interest is that to us who want to make decisions based on information?
very big concerns for long-term heart health. According to Harvard, this comes with serious risk.
Another opinion. Okay.
Not to mention raccoon eyes. Who
Are you serious? Number one, not everybody who is on a ketogenic diet is expressing these so-called raccoon eyes. Look, see, I don't have them. And I eat what you could call a ketogenic diet without actually trying to be on a ketogenic diet per se. Also, perhaps if we look around the three examples of humanity on the screen right now and assess whose ocular health and other health statuses seem to be tippy-toppy or otherwise. What do you think, Ted?
Bollocks!
Right. Serious health concerns. You might get dark marks under your eyes, which is, well, tell me what the mechanism is that would ketogenic diet would cause that. And then tell me why that's a problem.
Who wants those? The American Institute for Cancer Research says no cancer organizations recommend the ketogenic diet for cancer patients.
Who cares what they recommend? And, frankly, when you look at cancer organizations, well, for a group of organizations that have had as long as they've had a run up at the problem that they're supposed to be dealing with, the fact that they've got nowhere near dealing with that problem would suggest to you that you absolutely should not listen to them about that problem, wouldn't it? If you were doing logic. No? Okay.
With cancer or for prevention of cancer.
Well, what do they know about either of those things, these organizations?
Just the opposite. The American Cancer Society recommends a diet with a variety of vegetables.
Who cares what they recommend? How are they doing? If they get payment by results, how much are they going to get paid? This video threatens us with science about health disease. You told us that our ketogenic diet was going to kill us 3 times in 2 minutes. Are you going to actually put anything behind that ridiculous claim at all? Doesn't exist.
Green vegetables, red, orange, fiber-rich beans and peas and lentils, fruits, especially whole fruits in a variety of colors, and whole grains. That's like the opposite of the ketogenic diet.
So?
Anytime a diet tells you you can't eat an apple, there's something wrong. And
Okay, well, that's about the level of logic that you're able to operate on then, clearly, obviously. I really think we're done here, frankly, this early on. And I mean, this is obviously a completely incompetent individual with absolutely no clue of what he's talking about here at all. But let's sit through it because we've started now.
apple a day keeps a doctor away.
Well, some doctors probably need keeping away, I would suggest.
And if you eat only one
And apples are not the answer to achieving it.
apple, guess what? You're no longer on the ketogenic diet.
Depends on the size of the apple, buffoon.
Too many carbs. To understand how the ketogenic diet ends up increasing heart disease.
Well, here we go. My absolute area of expertise and not the skies. Let's see how he goes. Badly, I suspect.
Stroke risk. First, we got to understand how you can.
First, we've got to understand what a risk is. And once we understand what we're stating by saying risk, we need to understand that we are making a cause and effect claim. Then we need to understand that to make a cause and effect claim, we must support that with cause and effect data collected using the scientific disciplines as required. Do you have that? Because hitherto, nobody else in the field has that data. We can't get it because of ethics and practicalities and finances and things. How have you managed to get hold of it when the rest of us are still without this? No, there is no evidence of risk.
Stroke risk. First, we got to understand how you can clog your arteries, how atherosclerosis works.
But great, this is my area of expertise. Let's see how he goes. I suspect badly.
LDL cholesterol is one of the most important things.
And heart disease causation? No, it isn't. False.
If your LDL is high, your cholesterol is high, you could clog your arteries more.
No. Absolute rubbish.
The other thing is your arterial endothelium, the lining of your arteries. If it gets damaged and inflamed, cholesterol can build up there. And look at all these gray boxes at the top. Genetic determinants of arterial wall biology, high blood pressure, inflammation, smoking, and other things like diabetes can damage that artery lining. Then the LDL gets sucked up in there, starts to accumulate, it's oxidized, sucked up by these macrophages, which form these foam cells. Then the plaque progresses. Now, it can go one of two ways. On the right, it could be a stable plaque, or it can go and become a soft, unstable plaque, which leads to a heart attack or a stroke.
Okay, so that's about the worst description of the etiology and cause of atherosclerosis that I've ever seen provided by a so-called medically qualified individual. That was so divorced from the actual reality of the situation, left out so much information as to be laughable. Wow. No, cholesterol doesn't cause heart disease.
Absolute key to heart disease prevention.
No, it isn't. You mentioned the key to heart disease prevention already, and it's upstream from the cholesterol. It's the inflammation. That's the thing you need to take out.
And even reversal is getting them.
It's the inflammation and the physical damage to the tissues of the epithelium. I've covered this in great detail on my channel already. It's, as I say, an absolute area of expertise.
Those cholesterol numbers down and protecting your arteries from damage and inflammation, protecting the endothelial lining.
Now you're suggesting that cholesterol inflames the arterial linings, are you? Because that's what it sounds like, and it doesn't.
At all costs. So what in your diet raises your blood cholesterol number?
No, hang on a minute. You haven't established remotely that we need to do anything about cholesterol. We don't. It's under the control of our genes. We can leave them to it. Or if we should do anything, that lower is the answer. You've given us a string of opinions and a little flowchart that misrepresented the whole etiology of the situation, and not one single piece of evidence to support your idea that this diet's going to kill us somehow.
Numbers, what raises your LDL cholesterol? Eating cholesterol, eating saturated fats, and eating trans fats. Those three things.
Yes, sir.
And this is why the dietary guidelines say,
again, with appeal to authority and some guidelines, somebody's opinion. Why would we care about someone's opinion? We are waiting on you to hit us with this science that we were threatened with in the title of your video. You're going to tell us about the science supporting your claim that this diet will kill us somehow. Where's that?
Say straight out that individuals should eat as little cholesterol as possible.
Well, that's a false idea. That's somebody's opinion. Who cares?
Consuming a healthy eating pattern. Cholesterol's not an essential nutrient.
So what?
You don't need to eat any. Every cell in your body can make its own cholesterol.
Oh, great. Well, the same applies to carbohydrates. How do you feel about that?
And saturated fats really increase your LDL cholesterol too. These
so what?
tend to come from high-fat, animal-based.
That's what's supposed to happen. That's your genes reacting to the environment in which you're placing them at that time to optimize the operations of the evil machinations of the body at large. No problem.
Foods, meat, eggs, dairy, seafood, all those things. And yes, when you look at clogging of arteries, it looks like cheese. And if any of those
No, it doesn't. In fact, no. You don't even, have you not even seen any slides, let alone even any real, let's say, dissected human aorta or whatever, and had a look at this stuff? Do you even know what the makeup of atherosclerotic lesion is? I would suggest not. Also, the fact that you're now quoting studies including the car salesman of the year in the US for the last 50 years running, one Joel the Conman Khan, would basically give us an exact pinning of your exact level of incompetence in science, as well as your clear theological position. If that wasn't already clear just by watching and listening to you for about 3 seconds at the beginning of your video here. Anyway, there you go, staff. We can see what's going on. And you know, we've also got Willett there. No credibility whatsoever as a scientist. And Katz, another high priest of the Church of Anorexia Vegana. I thought this was going that way.
Saturated fat conspiracy theorists ever say to you, oh, saturated fat doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about that at all. Check out this white paper by the True Health Initiative.
So someone's opinion we should check out over our actual competent interpretation of the extant scientific data such that is available on this topic, should we? Typical vegan echo chamber, isn't it? Don't watch the science. Don't look at the science. Don't question the science. Even though that's precisely how you do science, by the way. Listen to us. We will tell you the accepted narrative, and then you will repeat it ad nauseum. Good lad. Carry on.
Walter Willett, a Harvard nutrition expert.
No, he's not a nutrition expert at all. He's an epididly-doodly-mologist. Ergo, a buffoon.
David Katz from Yale. They put together this great document really showing how important it is to avoid saturated fat.
No, they didn't show anything of the sort. They gave us an opinion based on absolutely nothing. Nothing credible whatsoever about that piece of, opinion.
And how it leads to heart disease risk.
But it doesn't. Still, risk is a cause and effect statement. There is no evidence to support such a claim. Does not exist. Sorry.
And this is backed up by a statement from the Institute of Medicine, also known
another opinion.
Known as the National Academy of Medicine, saying that they did not set a limit for how much cholesterol you could eat, how much saturated fat you could eat, or how much trans fats you could eat, because any amount that you eat above 0% of your energy is going to increase your LDL cholesterol number.
So what?
Numbers.
So?
Any amount.
So?
And you want to keep your LDL cholesterol crazy low if you can.
No, you don't. That's the last thing in the world you want to do, actually.
Check out this publication from the Journal of the American College of Cardiology, which explains it really well.
No, it doesn't. It's very, very poorly indeed.
So here's the main graph from the study. Follow me here. On the right, we have the cumulative risk of having a heart attack.
No, not risk. This is an associative study without the controls in place to be able to make a cause and effect statement like risk, or to project its results forward, backward, or sideways to any other group of individuals based anywhere in the world at any time. Sorry. No.
On the bottom, we have your age. And on the left, we have your cumulative LDL exposure.
Measured how? Exactly. Whoops. It's not measured. Not at all. It's estimated once or twice here and there over the years. A lot of granularity there, a lot of actual data points missing, no idea of signal to noise ratio, meaning, and certainly still no empirical evidence existing anywhere on the planet that would suggest that cholesterol is a causal agent of heart disease. So, no.
So the average American's LDL cholesterol is 125. And if you stay that way for your whole life, by the age of 40, you'll have a 1% risk of a heart attack. By the age of 60, a 4% risk. And by the
No, you are now projecting risk out to different individuals, all individuals, you have no basis to make that claim. You have not provided remotely enough data to support it. Associations do not inform on cause and effect. Ergo, you cannot say to somebody else, this is a risk for you. As soon as you say this is a risk for you, which you just said, you've gone further than this data is capable of informing. And you're into the land of woo-woo. You've left the building. Sorry, son, this is theological crackpottery and nonsense, not science. Show me an experiment, a controlled experiment.
At age of 80, a 16% risk of a heart attack.
No.
Now, I see a lot of patients who have LDL cholesterols way higher than that.
So what?
Say it was 160. By the age of 40, then you'd have a 3% risk.
No.
By the age of 60.
No. Completely invalid reading of the data, completely inappropriate use of the data, just absolute incompetent nonsense. No.
A 16% risk. And by the age of 80, you're off the charts, around a 50% risk of having had a heart attack.
Rubbish.
And if you had your LDL cholesterol nice and low, say around 60, look at this. By the age of 40, way under 1%. By the age
Rubbish.
of 60, still.
In fact, if you look at the incidence of cardiovascular disease outcomes in the largest data set ever collected, you will find that there is an optimum level of LDL. And as the LDL level drops below that optimum level, the incidence of heart disease precipitously increases. In fact, okay, that's what the actual observations tell us. Still not a cause and effect statement, but what I'm suggesting to you is that not even what you're suggesting here, it has not been observed. Okay? This is hypothetical stuff that you're pulling out of your anal orifice. You're making shit up here. This is not what happens. Okay? This is rubbish.
Way under 1%. And by the age of 80, still under 1% risk of heart attack and strokes.
No study informs on risk in any way.
Sooner in your life that you get your LDL down, the better you're going to be. You
False statement.
want to avoid cumulative exposure over your lifetime of
No, you don't want to do any such thing, in fact.
high LDL cholesterol number.
No, you don't want to do that at all.
And don't let anybody tell you that LDL doesn't matter. This is a consensus statement. And
Yes, should we have a look at the statement from the people who wrote this paper telling us how much money they got paid by people who make drugs that alter the level of cholesterol in people's blood? Also, what you find is when you read through this paper, as I have done myself many times over the years, that it is, in fact, an opinion piece. It's an interpretation of a bunch of independently collected data sets on a bunch of different hypotheses, actually. It is not, in and of itself, proof of or reason to accept a hypothesis that cholesterol or any fraction of the cholesterol or any of the lipoprotein carriers or any fraction of those are involved causally in cardiovascular heart disease, because that data, that proof, does not exist. All right? So, just incredible. I mean, have a look at the top of this page at the right-hand side there in big red print. Dear, oh dear. Dear, oh dear.
European Society of Cardiology, which goes through all the science saying straight out.
It doesn't go through any of the science. It goes through a bunch of opinions where it misinterprets the science. misuses the statistics and misleads the readership on a grand scale according to the money paid to them by the companies that wanted them to say that. Okay?
LDL cholesterol.
Shall we have a look at that statement again? Never gets old, does it? Right, so let's hear more about this completely unconfounded study.
Causes heart disease and stroke. They go through all the different lines of possible evidence in order to make that.
No, they don't. They, in fact, cherry pick and leave out quite a bit of very important information, as quite well pointed out by the counter paper to this, written by Ravenscoff and others. Go and find that one.
Determination, the plausibility of the evidence.
It's not plausible.
Strength, the biological.
It's not very strong.
Gradient.
The biological gradient is poor.
Temporal sequence.
The temporal sequence is in the correct order.
Specificity.
Specificity, no, not established.
Consistency.
Consistency, no, poor.
Coherency of the data.
Coherence, no. That's an opinion anyway, largely.
And then if you intervene and lower the numbers, what's the risk? And all of these had.
And there is no study that can inform us on risk in any way, shape, or form because of lack of control, inadequate observation, scientific discipline, etc. Sorry about that. Still the facts. Basically, as soon as any one of those fails on that list, you can discount any serious possibility of a causal relationship.
The highest level of evidence grade.
The highest level of evidence, there's no levels of evidence, in fact, other than zeros and ones, decisions made to accept or reject hypotheses on the basis of data sets provided and the methodologies used to collect those data sets, pretty much. That's what science is about. Any kind of hierarchical organization of levels or qualities of so-called evidence is no more than a construct and, in fact, somebody's opinion. And if you'd like to go and look up opinions on such hierarchies, you'll find that they rate themselves pretty poorly, actually. So, dear oh dear. Shall we move on with looking at ones and zeros then? Because so far, son, big round one, fat zero.
Making it absolutely convincing.
Only if you're an idiot and you want to be convinced in that way. Only if it is your deeply held theological heart's desire to believe that this is an established case, could you possibly form that opinion. That or complete incompetence, or both.
Cholesterol, if it's high, clogs your arteries.
No, it doesn't still. There have been no cases ever of anyone's arteries being clogged with cholesterol. No, doesn't happen. You don't even understand the disease that you're talking about here. Its development, its presentation. It's clear you haven't even seen or looked at a histological slide of an atherosclerotic lesion, let alone actually even seen inside a real human body, son. I have many, many times.
Increases your heart disease risk and your stroke risk.
No, it doesn't. There are no studies informing us on risk anywhere in the literature still.
So what are optimal LDL cholesterol numbers? Well, more and more.
Oh, you're going to give us someone's opinion now. Accumulating data from multiple lines of evidence consistently demonstrate that physiologically normal LDL level and the thresholds for atherosclerosis development and coronary heart disease events are approximately 50 to 70 milligrams per deciliter. No reference given. An opinion. What is meant by accumulating data? because accumulating means it's still happening. In which case, how could you have made a decision on the data set if you're still collecting it? Or if you've got a data set that's finished collection now under discipline, you've applied the scientific design to do an experiment to prove your point on causality, then we'd like to see it. And also would like to know how you got it past the ethics committee. In the meantime, can we stop with all this ridiculous opinion giving?
Or evidence is really showing we should have it between 50 and 70 milligrams per
There is no evidence to support that claim extant anywhere in the literature whatsoever.
deciliter. When you look at healthy babies,
There are no experiments on cholesterol level and incidence of problems in human beings under control in a laboratory lockdown situation lasting decades. Okay? Sorry. Still fact.
and primates out in nature, they're somewhere between 30 and 80 on their LDL cholesterol numbers.
Other animals are not relevant to what humans do, particularly. Have you noticed humans are unlike other animals? They behave differently to other animals.
And if you check out this study, which is
I have done very carefully.
a graph of a bunch of different clinical trials of primary prevention, each dot represents thousands of patients. The LDL
And what were the errors around those dots? Where is the indication of central tendency? Where is the view on how strong any association might be? And once you've done that, please explain to me how it is that you can possibly form the conclusion of causality on the basis of association, given that the first thing that you will learn in the first half an hour of your first undergraduate degree in any field of scientific endeavor is that association cannot inform you on causality.
cholesterol were the risk of heart attack.
No, not risk. Still, does not inform on risk. This is a retrospective look at what occurred in the past in a specific group of individuals at that time under the circumstances that those people lived, which we don't know almost anything about because they were free living. They weren't under control and observation. So what you have here is a mishmash of outcomes which are hard-baked and impossible to separate. We have no control. We have no science. We have an association. Points people to where to look and do some science, but the science hasn't been done. So you have to wait for the science. Whoops, we'll be waiting forever. So stop making the ridiculous claim. Be a disciplined scientist and tell people the truth. There is no evidence supporting a claim that cholesterol is causal in any health complaint of any kind. That is the truth, and that is what you should say.
Goes down close to 0, 50.
Goodness sake. An associative data set like this cannot be extrapolated beyond the lowest data point, nor above the highest data point in terms of the value of it on the x-axis. We are talking about something with a variable physiological range, which has an upper and lower limit. So the fact that a line that you draw through a data set might intersect the 0 point on the y-axis at a given point does not tell you that there is that change in risk for you if you get your cholesterol that low. Because I'll tell you what, the largest data set in existence tells you the exact opposite. All right, what's next?
D5. So what does the ketogenic diet do to your LDL cholesterol number? Well, check out this study from the Mayo Clinic where they took a bunch of people, put them on the ketogenic diet and looked at what's called the hyper-responders. About a third of people.
Yeah, so a construct, an idea with no utility, frankly.
Are hyper-responders. In this study, their LDL started at 125 and went to over 300.
So what?
Now, when they got off the ketogenic diet, their LDL came straight down.
So? That's what you'd expect.
Some of them were actually put on medications because their number went so high on their LDL cholesterol.
Well, that's a medical misadventure. That is an inappropriate thing to do. The intervention to a person's level of blood-borne cholesterol using statin medications as the primary driver of that intervention is absolutely, completely unsupportable from a scientific standpoint in terms of any meaningful outcome difference for any given living human being over a 100-year lifespan, in fact. And the risks are very, very significant because of the side effects of that particular intervention. So anyway, that's for another day.
Let's shift away from cholesterol and talk about the inflammation and damage to the artery lining. Animal-based foods versus plant-based foods. How do they play out? Well, again, ketogenic.
So putting a chart like this up on the screen doesn't prove anything. This is your formulation. This is your idea. Where is the science to support any of the claims that you're about to make?
Diet is very animal heavy, animal protein heavy. And when we look at what animal proteins do to inflammation and your artery health, TMAO, trimethylamine.
Okay, well, that one's been dealt with completely and utterly. TMAO is not an issue in people who are adapted over several months to a diet consisting of only the meats and fats of mostly large ruminant animals, in fact. Not a problem at all. As it turns out, there is a speciation or a phyla of bacteria that live in the guts of humans that breaks down TMAO to a completely harmless byproduct. The only time you find elevated levels of TMAO in people on meat-based diets is when you put them in studies, when you put them in studies and ask them to change their diet overnight suddenly from whatever they were eating, a mixed diet probably, to a meat-only diet. Oh, look, the TMAO went up. Well, of course, because the species of bacteria that eats TMAO haven't had time to develop yet. So for a short period of time, there'll be elevated TMAO, but then that bacteria will blossom to take advantage of that resource and they eat it up. So TMAO, not a problem. Done. Finished with that. What's next?
Oxide, heterocyclic amines.
Heterocyclic amines. Okay. So if heterocyclic amines are definitely a problem and definitely hugely pro-inflammatory and problem-based for us, where's the evidence that that's so?
Heme iron, new 5G, advanced glycolation.
Heme iron, the very kind of iron that we require absolutely as a human being to be able to absorb and use iron for our evil machinations. The very kind that pulses through every drop of blood in our body, the very kind that makes up the myoglobin in our muscles, the very thing that allows us to live at all suddenly is going to be a problem and kill us, is it? Stephen, how does that work exactly? No. New 5G, you said? No. Again, show me some evidence that new 5GC is a problem in free-living human beings over multiple decades. Because there's no evidence that's going to show that. This is just a theory.
End products and endotoxins are all produced when you consume animal-based proteins, and all of those things.
All of those, things like endotoxins and all of that, they're also produced when you eat plant-based slop too, son. So what's your problem?
In different ways, damage the artery lining and cause inflammation.
Well, show me that is the case. Show me some evidence in fully carnivorous people who have been fully carnivorous for 5 years or more. Show me that their incidence of endothelial damage is worse in any way than your beloved plant-munching fucktards over there at the Church of Anorexia Vegana. Or anybody else, in fact.
But when you get plant-based sources of protein, you've got fiber, vitamin C, and lots of...
Fiber's unnecessary. Vitamin C exists in perfectly sufficient amounts in muscle meat if that's all you're eating.
Different phytonutrients, which are...
Phytonutrients is just a buzz term. There are no required phytonutrients in the human diet. Remember, things that aren't required, you don't have to have them.
Are anti-inflammatory and help the health.
Yeah, there are also anti-inflammatory things that you'll find with meat. It's a very highly anti-inflammatory diet. In fact, the exact opposite of what you're claiming it is.
Of your artery.
Demonstrably, we see this again and again and again and again with people getting full remission from inflammatory and immune-based dysfunctions purely by removing the cause of those dysfunctions from their diet. Plants, okay?
Relining, lowering your risk of heart disease. How does this play out?
There are still no studies that inform us on risk in any way, shape, or form in either direction. No.
Out in clinical studies. Well, check out these publications from the Journal of the American...
Okay, clinical studies. Okay, there are no clinical studies on mortality. You can't get ethics to do studies on who dies in your study. These are retrospective, uncontrolled, prospective cohort studies. Okay, that's not science. So forget that first one in 2016. What's the second one here? Association of, well, there you go, association. Okay. Sunburn is associated with the sale of ice creams. Do we outlaw ice cream to solve the sunburn problem? Or should we do some science to see if there's a causal link between sunburn and ice cream? It turns out there might well be if there's a lot of polyunsaturated fatty acids in the ice cream, but that's for another day. What's the third study here? Association between. Clinical studies is what you just said. These are not clinical studies, son. No, they're not.
Medical Association, 3 of them, which all looked at the same thing. Animal-based proteins versus plant-based proteins. Does it cause heart attacks? Does it cause strokes? Does it cause cancer? And your overall mortality rate. What we find is replacement of only 3% of energy from animal protein and giving plant protein instead significantly lowered mortality.
Okay, so healthy user bias at play there probably. Were they controlled and kept in labs? No. So who cares? Not science.
Especially cardiovascular, heart disease mortality.
So the other thing you often find in these studies, let's do this one on the fly just for fun. Let's see what the sample size was like. It had 237,000 men and 179,000 women. And when they multiplied those numbers of men and women by the number of years that they were followed up with in this study, they got just over 6 million person years of so-called observation, which is really just following up with people every now and then and asking them a few questions, not science. Now, what we had was 77,614 deaths in that entire 6 million person years total. Okay? So let's take, for fun, let's grab a calculator. So what we want to do here is take the 77,600 deaths, give or take, total, and divide that by the number of person years of follow-up there, around 6 million. And what we're getting there is a baseline rate of death in this population of 1 per 100 person years of follow-up. Total. All deaths. So then you would go, well, that's a very low incidence of death per person per year sort of thing. It's higher than a general population. So this is obviously an aged population. 62.2 years at the outset. So 60 years of confounding and effects on their health from other things they've done in their life. How I have to keep explaining to people that this is not science. I can't get my head around how people don't just laugh this stuff out of the building. This is crazy. Anyway, let's look at the difference. What have we got? We have to take the most conservative bound of the 95% confidences. They're talking about a hazard ratio here, which is the same as saying risk ratio. It's not. It's nothing of the kind. You can't inform one risk with association. So they're saying that when you replace 3% of the energy from animal protein with plant protein, the difference was maybe as little as 3%. And that's 3% of that 0.0129333 that we had up on the screen a few seconds ago. The actual meaningful practical difference, even if this was a causal relationship, which it isn't, is so close to zero as makes no odds to any given living human being. So we move on.
Well, overall mortality was actually a lot of it attributed to egg protein. And
well, on what basis? Someone's opinion?
Red meat protein. But as we'll see, it's actually all types of animal-based proteins.
That's actually nothing of the sort.
So let's look at this graph from this study here. And let's see removing which animal-based proteins and substituting a plant-based protein.
So we're looking at relative so-called risk ratios. It's nothing of the sort still. The problem is that it's relative to baseline. And baseline is 0.012933333333. So,
has the most dramatic reduction in overall risk of dying.
And it doesn't inform us on risk at all. This is what happened in that group of people during the period of time that they were followed under the circumstances that they lived. This is not a cause and effect study that you can project to a future population of people, or indeed any one given individual like you've just done, because you've just said it's going to affect my risk. No, your data can't achieve that.
This line right here is where it would be neutral. Anything to the left of this line lowers the risk.
No, cannot inform on risk still. To the left of that line is a statistical decision that the mean of the people with respect to the variable that's being considered at that time is at a certain value. That's what those error bars are.
Of dying and would favor the plant-based protein source, eating beans and lentils.
Healthy user bias, even if this was a causal confounded. Done. Not causal data. Not an experiment. Not science.
Instead of the specific animal-based protein source. So processed red meat was the absolute worst. Don't eat your hot dogs.
Nonsense. Association. Unhealthy user bias.
Man. And then unprocessed red meat was still quite significant. That if you removed the unprocessed red meat.
Quite significant is not a word a scientist uses. Something is either significant statistically or it's not. And its statistical significance does not inform us on its clinical utility, which is none. Still.
Meat and instead had plant-based proteins, your mortality went down significantly. But there was even a mortality benefit of removing poultry and removing fish, and a very significant one for removing egg-based protein and dairy-based protein. So again, it's not just the cholesterol and the saturated fat, it's actually the animal-based protein as well, causing inflammation.
No, you just said cause. Show me the experiment that proves your cause and effect claim. It does not exist. Still.
And damage to the artery lining, leading to clogging of arteries, heart attack, stroke, and overall death.
The usual cause of damage to the linings of arteries leading to the development of atherosclerotic lesions, Stephen, is a turbulence issue. It's a blood flow dynamics issue, in fact. Nothing to do with the source of your protein. Shall we move on?
But Dr. Loam, on a ketogenic diet, you can lose a ton of weight. Well,
sure you can.
Of course you can lose a ton of weight. Look what Americans eat. They eat 63% of their calories from processed foods. So anything that gets rid of sugar and refined carbohydrates, you're going to lose a lot of weight on it, right? So it's not necessarily the weight loss that's important. You want to be healthy in the long term.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, one of the most important things you can do to improve your health status and your lot in life is to reduce unnecessary carriage of adipose tissue from your body.
You want to live a long, good life without heart attack, without stroke, without
Correct, yes.
cancer. And you can lose weight doing other things that aren't healthy for you, right? What if we gave you chemotherapy? You're going to throw up. You're not going to be able to eat. You're going to feel miserable. You're going to lose weight. Does that mean chemotherapy is good for you in the long term? Absolutely not. Same thing with becoming a cocaine addict. You can lose a lot of weight if all you did was cocaine and drugs. Is that going to be good for you in the long term in regards to your health? No.
No, but how does any of those things relate to the effects of a ketogenic diet on the health of human beings, other than it does not in any way?
Just like a ketogenic diet. Just because it can make you lose weight doesn't mean it's good for you in the long term.
Well, good thing we have all the anecdotes that suggest to us that it really is good for you in the long term to be on a sensibly designed, species-appropriate, species-specific diet, which happens to fall within the realms of what a lot of people would call a ketogenic style diet, but without any attempt necessarily to be specifically a ketogenic diet, because ketones are beside the point, as it turns out.
Now let's look at some data in regards to what low carbohydrate ketogenic type diets do to your overall health.
Okay, so none of the studies in this paper here actually looked at low carbohydrate diets. In fact, they all looked at moderate carbohydrate diets. This is another observational, naturalistic observation. This is not science. This is not a controlled experiment. This does not establish anything.
Low carbohydrate diets in this study were associated.
There were no low carbohydrate diets considered in the study. They were all moderate. at best.
with significantly higher risk of all
No, not risk. There are no studies that can inform on risk still.
cause mortality. And in this study, low carbohydrate dietary patterns favoring animal-based
Same problem.
protein as fat sources such as lamb, beef, pork, chicken were associated again with a much higher mortality. Whereas
No, not much higher at all, in fact. About the same numbers, so close to zero as makes no odds for any one given living human being over a 100-year lifespan if this was actually causal data, which it isn't still. So no.
if you had plant-based protein and plant-based fats such as vegetables, nuts, peanut butter, whole grains, you had a much lower mortality. Now, how about in patients who have heart disease? That's my area. I'm a cardiologist. Well,
how is it that you don't understand cardiovascular pathology at all? Other than you're actually not trained in that, who cares? All you're trained to do is to write the given prescription, pretty much.
Well, if you have heart disease, this study showed a 53% increase in all-cause mortality.
From what to what? What was the baseline? What was the absolute change? And then show me why you would believe your observed association to be causal. Should we wait for that?
If you had a low-carbohydrate diet that was high
How do you define that? Low carbohydrate diet.
in animal-based proteins. And yet another study showing that switching to the ketogenic diet is associated with increased cholesterol numbers.
Yeah, we know that. And that's not a concern.
And increased inflammation markers.
In some people initially until they adjust to the diet properly. Sure.
We just said we don't want. This is why the guidelines from the American College of Cardiology and the American Heart Association for Prevention of Heart Disease show that a plant-based
So an appeal to authority, still no science.
diet is ideal for overall heart health.
No, it isn't. Complete nonsense.
Come on.
That's an opinion.
And Dr. Loam, the caveman used to eat this way, right? Well, no, actually they didn't, but even
Actually, yeah, they did.
if they did, do you really want to live to be only 35 years old?
Yeah, and there were many things that had an impact on the lifespan of the caveman, weren't there? Heart disease wasn't apparently one of those things.
That was the life expectancy of the caveman.
Okay, an average value. And now what's the noise around that? And did humans live to old age? Or did everybody die at 35? Maybe that 35 was impacted by the very likely quite high mortality rate in infancy back then, perhaps? Don't know.
So what should we do? Well, data from Dean Ornish.
Well, number one, Dean Ornish never provided any data that would convince a remotely competent scientist or clinician of anything. But let's hear about Dean Ornish.
Here's his lifestyle heart trial published in 1990.
Right, so a naturalistic observation, not a scientific experiment, not well controlled, confounded to bits, did not establish a cause and effect relationship between anything and anything else. A complete waste of time.
Which showed that if you took people who had clogged arteries of greater than 50% or more, that the average percentage stenosis blockage regressed, went down if you followed a whole food, plant-based, low-fat diet.
In the short term, that's not surprising. That's what we'd expect due to the effects of having alleviated the cause, one of the causes, of the atherosclerosis in the first instance surrounding the effects of the activities of the Randall cycle. That doesn't mean that the vegan diet is good for you long term, just because you will see probably a regression in inflammatory markers such as atherosclerotic presentation over an initial period of time when transitioning from a standard diet as the starting point. But so what?
Diet versus a control group, which actually...
There was no control group in this experiment, for goodness sake. Have a read of that. Did you even read this paper? There is nothing in this paper that would qualify as a control group. Okay?
progressed and worsened their heart disease. So comprehensive lifestyle changes, including a whole food, plant-based, low-fat diet, can actually regress and reverse heart disease in just 1 year without the use of medication.
The same is true of an entirely carnivorous approach to nutrition for precisely the same reason, the same mechanism actually. It's the alleviation of the Randall cycle issue combined with an overall reduction in whole body inflammation, leading to a better presentation in the blood flow dynamics I was referring to earlier, which also lead to causally to the development of heart disease. So what?
So then why then do so many people advocate a ketogenic type diet? There's lots of doctors.
Because it's safe and effective and safe. It does what it says it does. If it's properly applied and sensibly applied, and you get some decent advice on what to do and what not to do in the first instance, like anything.
There's out there that are saying that you should do this. It's all about the money. People love to hear good.
Says the guy who put the opinion piece of the European Consensus Board up on the screen as proof of something. You'd have to put a much bigger fistful of $100 bills than that to cover that list on that study, wouldn't you? Of monies paid to those people to lie to you, mislead you.
Good news about their bad habits. You can lose weight this way, but it's not good for you in the long term.
Nonsense. There's no evidence to support that claim. None at all, still.
And these authors, these people, they sell books, they sell supplements to correct the nutritional deficiency.
What do you sell, sunshine? Everybody's got something to sell you. We know you've got several things to sell us. A ridiculous bill of goods that won't hold up under even the most basic cursory inspection for veracity, validity, or even remotely sensible commentary from you. It's just been rubbish. You've got some cholesterol-lowering drugs to sell us, I'm sure. And you've got a theology about a plant-based diet, which is false. It's a false theology. What you don't have is a scrap of science to support you. Deal with it.
Deficiencies that their diet causes, and one of the greatest historical
Cause, as you say. Show me some evidence of cause and effect.
examples of that is Dr. Atkins and the Atkins diet, who sold millions and
Yes, Dr. Atkins, who died of a head injury.
millions and millions of books and made millions more money just selling the supplements that he needed to give his patients to correct the nutritional deficiencies that his diet caused.
Nonsense. Absolute nonsense.
Check out this clip from a debate between Dr. Atkins and Dr. Dean Ornish that was actually held by the USDA in regards to what we should be eating.
Who cares about some ridiculous debate between two individuals which occurred many, many years ago?
Lower overall heart disease risk. This is quite embarrassing for Dr. Atkins.
That's your opinion. Let's see. It might be. I don't know. I haven't seen this.
Resent the idea that people are saying that my diet is not heart healthy. If it were not heart healthy, we wouldn't be reversing heart disease and getting these people who were having chest pain on a little bit of exertion out there running and jogging a few months later.
Anecdotes.
Dr. Ornish, to follow up on it.
First of all, let me say that I would love to see some data from Dr. Atkins showing that he can actually get reversal of heart disease, measuring the underlying disease.
Yeah, well, you haven't produced any Ornish, ever, either. We've just covered that. You put together a naturalistic observation that was completely flawed, absolutely uncontrolled, self-selecting. You had no control group to speak of, and certainly nothing that would qualify as a adequate control to the situation. You prove nothing.
This process.
We're working on it.
Well, good.
But we're not as good a fundraiser as you are. We have to dig into our own pockets.
I'm sorry. Carolyn, I understand that issue.
I think with the number of books you've sold, you could probably fund your own studies. But most people, unfortunately, when they think about the diet I recommend, think about
how does any of this affect the facts at hand at all? And the fact that this buffoon who's made this video hasn't produced a scrap of evidence to support his claim that the ketogenic diet is going to kill us somehow.
the reversal diet. And it is a strict diet. And I'd love to be able to tell people that more moderate changes can reverse heart disease, but they don't. Every study that's been done where they've looked at arteriography has found that a 30% fat diet, the majority of people continue to get worse. But there is a genetic variability in how efficiently your body can handle fat and cholesterol. What I tell people is that if your cholesterol level is below 150 consistently, then either you're not eating much fat and cholesterol or your body's very good at getting rid of it. Either way, your risk of disease is so low.
There is no way to inform a person on their risk of disease on the basis of their cholesterol whatsoever. None.
Whatever you're doing is probably fine.
Thank you.
Most people don't fall into that category. And
You wanted to make a comment, Dr. Egan?
Just because it was brought out about
Dr. Atkins claimed to reverse heart disease. And he said he's working on the data, but he's been making this claim for a long time.
No, I haven't.
And that's what excuse me.
But I haven't
Excuse
been
me.
making that claim.
You just did, and you don't have the evidence to back it up. Now, this diet's been out there for 30 years or close to.
And I haven't been able to fund a study. I've asked
Excuse me. 10 million books in print, and you can't fund the study?
Now I can. And I will be the first doctor to dig in.
Nobody has ever published a study showing heart disease reversal, cause and effect, with adequate scientific discipline for us to take it seriously as evidence of cause and effect. Nobody. Still.
His own pocket to do a study, and it will be me, but it was the first time I had a
10 million books. You market the vitamins. You sell the vitamins.
This is an attack on a bloke that happened years and years and years ago by the usual buffoonery of these veg-hearted fuckknuckles of the Church of Anorexia Vegana without a single bit of logic, science, or anything behind them. What they've got behind them is arrogance and, frankly, stunning lack of self-awareness. That's all they've got, these clowns. It's incredible. I mean, you challenge any one of these buffoons to front up to me for a debate about the evidence in support of any of the ridiculous claims that they want to make. Crickets. They run away with shit in their pants. They don't want to get anywhere near it because they know what happens.
Vitamin now. The nutritional deficiency.
That's true. That's why
And
I'm
you
doing
market
the
them.
study now.
There are no nutritional deficiencies that a person can expect on a properly designed, species-appropriate, species-specific diet, which, by the way, happens to be 100% carnivore. Okay? No plant material at all is required in the diet, in fact.
Saying
That's why I couldn't do it before.
you market this. I say this is not for the public good. This is marketed. This is a money-making proposition.
Dr. Atkins himself ended up having a heart attack, heart failure, and hypertension when his records were accidentally released. And when he passed away,
He died of secondary problems associated with a period of hospitalization based on a head injury, you buffoon. Dr. Atkins put on significant body fat during his time in hospital. That's interesting, isn't it? No one has ever established that the cause of death for Dr. Atkins was anything but the secondary effects of the head injury. And even if he did die of heart disease, so what? Do you know what Dr. Atkins ate his whole life? Because maybe he was promoting a ketogenic diet for 30 years, but at that stage, that looks like it was about half of his lifespan. What was he doing the other 30 years up to that point? Do you know? I don't. No N equals 1 example of anybody dying of anything is going to prove a damned thing, is it?
was 258 pounds.
Yes, at the time of death. What was his weight at the time of admission to hospital after the fall that put him there?
Clearly, his diet wasn't working for his own individual health.
That's right. The one that he was eating in the hospital that made him cause a whole bunch. See, you didn't even do your research, did you, son? It's incredible.
So what does work for long-term weight loss and long-term health? Well, check out this study.
Well, we don't know, because that would be a cause and effect statement. You'd need to qualify the statement with what evidence might make different inferences with what level of surety and quality of... No, okay.
The broad trial, which put people on a whole food, plant-based, low-fat diet.
What is that?
And you had huge improvements in the BMI, cholesterol, and other risk factors.
Huge. So you take someone off the worst possible diet in existence, the standard Western diet, and you put them on a diet which is ostensibly devoid of nutrition, and people lose weight. Well, bugger me.
To the best of the researchers' knowledge, this program achieved more weight loss at 6 and 12 months than any other clinical trial has ever shown.
There are no controlled trials over any period of time which can adequately inform on this question. They are all poorly controlled, confounded, no good. Sorry.
Without limiting calories and without mandating any exercise, a whole food, plant-based, low-fat diet. And this is what the blue zones eat, right?
No, it isn't. That's a falsehood. That is a lie. It's been shown to be a lie time and time again. That's a theological lie.
They're a very high carbohydrate diet, but their
No, they're not necessarily at all.
carbohydrates are coming from fruits and vegetables, beans and lentils, whole grains, nuts, and seeds.
And what was the diet like 100 years ago? And how do you know?
They were much lower in fat percentage of calories, 20% versus ketogenic, which is 7.
Even if everything you're saying was correct, which it isn't, in fact. So? Associations again. Confounded associations. Have you controlled covariates, collinearities, other confounders? No, this proves nothing.
70% or so. And they were lower in proteins, about 15.
I mean, you've got to be a special kind of stupid to suck this lollipop, don't you, boys and girls? You really do have to be a very special kind of stupid. That's what these guys rely upon, of course. It just bewilders me on a daily basis that anybody in the world could possibly be this stupid.
15% of calories from proteins. Now, the longest living culture, which is similar to the Ornish diet, was the Okinawans.
Mm-hmm.
They were 80.
And they weren't similar to the Ornish diet at all 100 years ago. And neither are they now, in fact.
5% carbohydrates, 6% fat, and 9% protein. So
that's false. That is not true.
Very low protein diet.
No, that is not true.
Very high carbohydrate diet. And this is what you do for heart disease reversal.
No, it isn't. It's one of the things you can do. However, will it lead you to long-term health overall? No, that's a bad idea, it would seem.
Very similar. And those Okinawans, arguably the longest living culture ever described.
And arguably not.
So what should we do? How do we think about nutrition then? Well,
it depends on whether you have a competent faculty of reasoning or not. I do, and you don't. So people just need to take their pick as to who they think is worth listening to, I guess.
You know, we have 3 categories of food. We have processed foods, which include all the junk that's obvious, the refined carbohydrates like white flour, white sugar, and added oils and fats. Then the second category of food we have are the animal-based foods, the high-fat ones, the low-fat ones, any of them, meat, eggs, dairy, seafood, cheese. And then we have whole, unprocessed, plant-based.
Yeah, that's an oxymoron because plants are not food for human beings, actually, as it turns out.
What we want to do is remove the processed foods completely and dramatically reduce.
You don't want to do that at all. That's the last thing you want to do.
Or eliminate the animal-based foods and focus on a predominantly whole food, plant-based diet.
No, you don't want to do that. This is your opinion, son. You haven't given us any reason to accept your opinion as valid, worthwhile, correct. You've just given us your opinion. And it's fucking ridiculous.
It should really just be one category of food. So avoid the ketogenic diet at all costs. Now, maybe if you were to do a ketogenic diet in a more plant-based fashion, a plant-based keto diet, perhaps it would be better if your cholesterol numbers are down. And
you really are obsessed, aren't you, son? It's a sad thing for you. It really is. No, you don't want to do plant-based anything.
You know it's not causing you some inflammation. That might be better, but even with that, there's not a lot of long-term studies to say that that is what you should be doing either.
There are no studies that tell you what you should be doing if you're looking for cause and effect inferences. None exist, still.
So just stick to a whole food, plant-based, low-fat diet.
No thanks. That's a bad idea, it seems.
It's going to help you lose weight.
Well, maybe compared to your standard diet, perhaps, in the short term.
Going to give you more energy. And
no.
It's going to make you live long and live better.
No, both claims that cannot be supported with evidence.
So for those of you that want to learn more about weight loss, check out my weight loss video and my discussion panel video that we did at the International Conference on Nutrition and Medicine, where weight loss experts, including myself, talked all about diet, drugs, surgery, and a lifestyle.
Right. So summing up is happening. So we can sum up here and get ready for our next rotation. Can't we, staff? So basically, as expected, a video that promised us a bunch of science and provided us with exactly no science whatsoever. In fact, it was an opinion from start to finish, and frankly, a very, very, very stupid opinion. What do you think, Ted?
What, are you retarded?
Yes, and yes, it was me that put that safety pin through the back of Ted's head. You got to keep him in line somehow, don't you? Hey? Ooh, 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 ooh. Right, see you next time.
Bollocks!